Good evening, everyone. My name is David Van Zandt. I'm the president here at the New School. And I want to welcome all of you to the Festival of the New. This has been a week-long extravaganza for the New School as we celebrate our 100th anniversary. We've had more than 140 different programs, events, performances around the university, and we have a number more tomorrow. So I urge you to look us up on the web, come and see what's going on tomorrow, and maybe come by. We've been at many venues in the neighborhood here, and every one of our colleges, our programs, our disciplines has put on at least one program in this week. So I think that's spectacular, and I think each in its own way reflects what the New School has been the last 100 years. This is a real opportunity for us to look both back to the last 100 years as well as forward to the next 100 years. We opened our doors a century ago, and the founders, their purpose was to create a free and unfettered place for intellectual discussion and creation. They brought together scholars, creative practitioners, and citizens just interested in grappling with the most important issues of the day. And the other very important thing, it was open to all. It was open to all. At the time, higher education was very limited, but the New School was open to all who wanted to come. Now we're here 100 years later, and I think we just keep finding the same impulses that we started with, animating everything we do. We were founded originally on principles of creativity and critical thinking and being engaged socially and trying to make a difference in the world. And we're still that way, and we'll be that way for the next 100 years. Today, the New School is the only university in the world with a world-class design school, Parsons, together with very strong social sciences, humanities, and performing arts. And this is a place where engaged innovators, what we call engaged innovators, can come and advance their careers. Engaged innovators are people who are very creative, but want to use that talent, that capability to make a difference, in the world. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight. We have a great program. For you, and I just want to say a couple things about our guests before we bring them out. Our two guests are distinguished alumni who have chosen to make their marks in very different ways. One by communicating as a news reporter, and the other as a world-renowned sex therapist. I can't wait to see where the conversation goes tonight. Now, I won't recite their full bios because we are hoping their conversation will take us through a bit of their personal journeys. But here's a little bit about them. First is Bill Ritter, who will be interviewing our other guest. Bill, of course, is very familiar from Eyewitness News here in New York, where he has been since 1998. He started out in print journalism as a reporter and editor of the San Diego County edition of the Los Angeles Times and the San Diego Business Journal. Then he began his TV career in 1987 for KNSD, the NBC affiliate in San Diego. Think about that. He has covered the biggest and most important news events of the past 30 years. He attended San Diego University from 1968 to 1972, but was kicked out of that school for demonstrating against the Vietnam War. And then 40 years later, he came back to earn his bachelor's degree here at the New School, graduating just a couple of years ago in 2016 with his bachelor's in liberal arts. He's been a wonderful friend and support of the New School in so many ways, and we are really delighted to have him back on campus today. Then there's Dr. Ruth. Dr. Ruth Westheimer, she's a Holocaust survivor whose parents perished in a concentration camp. Her trajectory following that devastating early period of her life is nothing short of amazing. She immigrated to British-controlled Mandatory Palestine, later joined the Haganah in Jerusalem as a scout and sniper. In 1950, she moved to France, where she studied and then taught psychology at the University of Paris. In 1956, she immigrated to New York City. And then, after earning her master's degree here at the New School, I believe it was in sociology, went on to earn her doctorate degree from Teachers College at Columbia University. It was, though, a job with Planned Parenthood that set her on her path, studying human sexuality. And the rest of the day, say, is history. What's that? History. It's history. Thank you. Herstory, thank you. She revolutionized the way we talk about sex and sexuality on radio and television, and quickly became a household word for her candid, funny, and respectful style. Her TV and radio appearances, books, awards, and honors are far too many to name, although she just told me she's written 40 books in her lifetime. I hope you've had a chance to see the recent documentary about her work, which was just shown here earlier today. But I think she's even better in person. So let's go forward with our discussion today and have both of them come out. Bill and Dr. Ruth.
Come right here.
All right. Okay.
You comfortable?
Yes, I asked for a pillow so I can look into his eyes. They all are so tall.
I will be seated in a second. Let me get my notes.
President ever.
Are you comfortable?
I'm perfect.
I had to do some research. I have interviewed Dr. Ruth at various times over more than 25 years, starting when I was at Good Morning America, and it's just an honor. She's a ball of fire and a life force, and she's 91 years old this year.
91 and a half.
And at 4'7", she says she's shrunk a half an inch.
Half an inch, not half a foot.
I'm giving her more feet, less feet, but it's a pleasure to be here. And you're not going to learn so much about me as I think you're going to learn a little bit about Dr. Ruth, vis-a-vis what we are at the New School, embracing the new, becoming disruptors at various parts of our lives, what it's going to mean for you, for the next generation of disruptors and people who embrace the new. And she's got a lot to say. Some of it controversial, some of it you might disagree with, but this woman has had an impact on society. You have had an impact on society.
So first tell them that every night,
yes,
and your wife knows it,
yeah,
that I go to sleep with Bill, because I watch that Bill every single night, and then I smile and I go to sleep.
Now, if I say, well, I like that. If we are in a different world than we used to be. If I said that in the newsroom, I'd be called to HR. So, but we used to be able to do that. I want to talk. There's so many things to talk about. So we're going to get to everything, I think, in the next hour, and then hopefully take some of your questions. Let's talk with the new thing. And the new thing is there was a documentary done this year on you.
Some of them saw it.
You saw, how many people saw the documentary? Oh, that's great. So what I like about the fact that you saw it, before you get into answering this, is that you have a backstory that's enormous, and it's layered, and it's complex, and it's beautiful, and it's kind of scary, and people can see that you're more than just someone who's 91 with a lot of energy and hopefully many years ahead of her. You're someone who has made a difference in your life. There were differences made because of what you did.
I like to hear that. Now, the first thing I want you to tell them is the ones who haven't seen it yet,
yeah,
please go on Hulu.
If you haven't seen it yet, please go on Hulu.
And they will laugh and they will cry.
At the documentary, yes, I think they will. Why did you decide to do it, a documentary?
So first, when Rafi Marmor, the producer, called me, he's in Los Angeles, I didn't know him, I said, no, thank you. I said, I've done enough television and I don't want to, I just did something for Great Britain, like a little documentary. Then I saw a film that he did called No Place on Earth. And from my history and from where I come from, that title hit me because that was true for me as a Jewish child growing up in Frankfurt am Main. And when the Nazis came to power, my father was taken to a labor camp, not a concentration camp yet. And then he wrote that I have to join a group of children that went to Switzerland. If that postcard hadn't come into my hands, I wouldn't be here. In 1930...
Wait, he sent you a postcard?
He sent a
when you said he
postcard
wrote you, that's how he wrote
that
you.
I had to join a group of children, a Kindertransport. In 1938, very fast, there was a conference in Evian. Let's save German Jewry. And the conference was attended also by an envoy from the United States, Roosevelt had sent. The conference failed miserably. Nothing happened, except a cry, let's at least take the children so maybe the parents can pack up and move to any country that would take them. For some reason, 10,000 children went to England, despite the fact, Bill, that there were dark clouds on the horizon in 1939. They knew there would be a war.
Right.
Holland, Belgium, France, and Switzerland took 300 Jewish children for 6 months, hoping the parents could pick them up and go someplace that would take them.
So you went to...
If I had not been with the group to Switzerland, I wouldn't be alive. The group in England survived. Holland, Belgium, and France, those children did not survive. So I was with a group that went to Switzerland, supposedly for 6 months. Out of the 6 months, we stayed in that children's home that became an orphanage 6 years.
Because your parents were killed?
Because the parents were then, first my father was taken, which is shown in the movie, and waved to me. That was the last time I saw him. Then my whole family, my mother, my grandmother, they were all sent to Auschwitz.
And if you had not gotten that postcard from your father, because lots of things could happen to postcards.
I would not be alive.
You would not be here.
Because I would be with them.
I think what a lot of people don't know is, of the 6 million Jews who were killed in World War II by the Nazis, 1 million were children. 1 million were children, your age, who didn't get a postcard or whatever. So
I have to say to you, Bill, that my parents actually gave me life twice. Once when I was born, and once when they put me on that train to Switzerland.
Before we get into your specialty, I was going to do the Holocaust at the end, but since you brought it up, let's go into this, because it did define, and it's a good precursor to how you got here and what your philosophy was, and this fact that you understood at a very early age that you were meant to be here for some reason. You were given a chance to be here that, if not for chance itself, you would have been killed. And I think it did inspire the rest of your life, and to do something worthwhile. And you do come full circle. You are on the board of the Jewish Museum of Heritage,
Jewish Heritage,
the Museum of Jewish Heritage.
A living memorial to the Holocaust.
And you just got through with an incredible exhibit, starting an exhibit in the spring, about not just the Holocaust, but specifically about Auschwitz. The first time artifacts from Auschwitz have been brought here. How many people saw that exhibit in Lower Manhattan? Some people? Okay. It's just
all of you,
quite moving.
Bill, please all of you to go twice. First time you're going to be upset. There is a railroad wagon in front of the museum that transported people like my parents to Auschwitz. And then you're going to be upset seeing the exhibit. And then you have to go one more time, because you're going to learn some historical facts that even I didn't know about the rise of Nazism, about all of the horrible things that have happened. And you and I will go together.
Okay.
And with Jeff Tabak, who is on the board of the museum.
There?
Raise your hand, Jeff.
Right there?
Right there. And who is a big shot attorney, and who is on the board of the museum with me. We're going together.
So I think that the interesting thing, it's never forget, hashtag never forget is the mantra for the Holocaust. And it seems to me that it's especially timely for two things. I think that this country is dealing with some of the fallout from that right now, when we have people seeming to accept Nazism. There are many neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Number two, there are people in your generation, and I'm not meaning to lump everybody, but in this school's college generation, that is, according to research, skeptical of all the numbers that we're throwing out. And last Holocaust Remembrance Day in spring, many adults, they found, the study, lack the basic knowledge of what happened. And it's more pronounced in millennials.
So I have to tell you something.
You do.
Very important what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because a few weeks ago, I was at the museum, and there is a shofar, which is important to talk about today because it's in the middle of the Jewish holidays.
Rosh Hashanah last week and this week, and then next week Yom Kippur.
There is a shofar that a man smuggled out of Auschwitz when he walked out. The Nazis were still there. How he did that, I don't understand. That's a tremendous amount of courage. And I said, he must have known that there's a ray of hope by blowing that shofar, by saying, better times will come. But a tremendous amount of courage to take that out.
And in the museum, there was that shofar there, as you said.
And it's there now.
The numbers are staggering. 31% of Americans and 41% of millennials believe that 2 million or fewer Jews were killed in the Holocaust, not 6 million.
Wait, Bill, I want to tell you something else. When you say about Jews, you also have to add homosexuals, you have to add gypsies, and you have to add disabled people. Because the Nazis had that idea that everybody Aryan has to be of a certain size, white, and they killed mainly Jews, but also the other people.
Right, so that even makes the point even more. 52% of Americans wrongly think that Hitler came to power through force, and in fact, he came to power through elections. He was elected by the Germans. The numbers that I finally want to get to you, 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust. There were, if my research is right, 9 million Jews in Europe at the time. So 2/3 of the population of Europe that were Jewish were killed there. Right now, there are fewer than 15 million Jews in the world. So just think about that number. Most people, experts estimate that there would be more than 35 million Jews in the world had there not been a Holocaust. So it's just staggering. And using that, because we're not going to litigate the Holocaust here, I think, but it is important as the basis for how you lived your life. How did it affect you when you came here finally? I mean, you were a sniper for the Israeli army at one point. How did
Watch
you come
out,
back?
the questions that you're asking me. Because I can still put 5 bullets in a red circle.
Well, this is a gun-free school, and so if we're going to frisk you, we're going to frisk you. But
I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
So I was in a children's home in Switzerland that became an orphanage. I then went to Palestine. I was and still am very much of a Zionist. I go every single year. And all of us, it wasn't an act of heroism on my part, all of us in 1948 became kind of members of a group to fight for Israel. So I was in the Haganah, and for some reason, which I don't understand myself, I was a very good sniper. And I've never killed
I don't think anyone's shocked.
I've never killed anybody,
Good.
but I was badly wounded on my 20th birthday on both legs from a cannonball that killed some girls next to me, and that wounded me very badly on both legs. That's not why I'm short. I would have been short anyway. And I didn't think that I would not have lived in Israel my whole life, but I was fortunate. I married somebody, I went to Paris, I went to the Sorbonne, and then we have to come to this United States, because I never thought that I ever would have money to come to the United States, but the Germans at the time sent people like me a small amount of money, all those people who couldn't finish school in Germany. I said, "Hope, that's my opportunity." My whole family was killed, except an uncle who went from Germany to Shanghai and then to San Francisco. I said, I need to see that uncle. So I took that money and a lover. That we'll talk about that later. And came to this country. And now I have to say one important thing, which we will talk about, how you got to the new school. Without the new school, I would not have had an academic career, because I was not permitted to go to high school. I do not have a high school diploma. But I studied at the Sorbonne in Paris, at the Institute for Psychology. There was a rule after World War II that if you passed an année préparatoire, preparation year, you could get accepted to the Sorbonne.
Because so many kids had been pulled out of school during the war.
Not just Jews,
Right, everybody,
French people who went to the army. So I was fortunate. I got into the Institute for Psychology. And then when I came to this country, this new school people took the transcripts that Monsieur Dancelot, the ambassador from France, certified that I took these courses. And they said, I can come to the new school. They gave me a scholarship. And I can take 2 undergraduate courses and then go for masters. The scholarship, now there is a Ruth Westheimer scholarship, and the honorarium for today goes into the scholarship. I don't know where yours goes.
Wait a minute, I'm not getting an honorarium. Nobody said a damn thing about an honorarium.
They told me the honorarium goes to the scholarship.
Well, if I get one, I'll give it to the Ruth Westheimer scholarship fund.
Scholarship.
All right.
So when I hear the new school, I have that big smile on my face because I got my master's in sociology at the new school,
Right.
and then I went to Columbia University's Teachers College, where I'm now teaching my 5th year.
So they let you come in with this, you've had life experiences, we want to get you going on your career, and they let you do it. They do the very same thing now. How many people have benefited from that here? They're graduated.
You?
I did, yes, I
So
did.
tell them.
I
Tell them
will,
about
but your story is much more interesting than mine. David told my story, I think. What was it? What do you remember about it back then? What sparked you back then? You were young, it's 50 years ago.
I was poor. I had no
60
money.
years ago.
I lived in Washington Heights, where I still live today, but in a better apartment today. 3 bedrooms overlooking the Hudson. The most important thing about the new school in those years, there were professors, Jewish professors, that were able to teach and make a living because the other universities in this country didn't accept them. So the new school had psychologists, Wertheimer, they had Miali. I can list all of those professors that were able to be professors here where they were not accepted by any other university. No Yale, no Princeton, none of the others. And that new school was called the University in Exile.
Right.
And for me, it was the stepping stone for everything that happened later. Now, not in terms of sex. Here it was
Not yet.
sociology. Not yet. I didn't know yet about the sex, but I made friends. For example, Cynthia Fuchs Epstein is a famous sociologist. I met her at the new school. She and Howard Epstein were my first American friends. And I met other people, very many friends that I still cultivate and am friendly with, I met at the new school. My English I already now knew German, I knew French. My English was not exactly
What it is today.
What it is today. So behind me were the Haudeks from Germany, and I heard them speak German. They took notes, they copied the notes for me, and that's how I studied. So I have I also was with an Arab from Egypt, Eddie Murphy, what was his, Eddie? No, I forgot his last name for a moment. He studied economics. He was an Arab, and he and I were the head of the Foreign Students Association. There was a room for us. So it gave me not just the intellectual knowledge, it gave me friends. It really made my life in New York interesting and possible. The Haudeks gave me a ride home, and they went always for coffee and English muffins. And I was hungry, but I never dared. I waited for them not to finish their English muffins, and then
You grabbed it off the plate. I think a lot of students do that, right? I remember doing that in the cafeteria at school.
So interesting, Bill, that some of these people are still my friends. Then there were Widdisch and other people who were sociologists, and I couldn't understand them. They were critical of this country. And I said, this great country, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who says what has happened to her could only have happened in America,
Mm-hmm.
I say, what has happened to me could only have happened in New York. Because people, when I started the radio, New Yorkers are very generous, accepting accents, and look at what happened to me.
But you can be critical of a country and still love it, right?
Yeah, I have to tell
And you can love a country and be critical of it.
I have to tell you, up until now, I had plenty of Vietnam students when I taught at Lehman. But up until now, I said, I do not talk about politics. Somebody who talks about orgasms and erection from morning to night has to stay away from politics.
You're getting schooled here.
I changed my mind lately.
Oh, you're now talking politics.
There are three things that I do talk about.
Okay.
I do talk about how upset I am when I see children being separated from parents. That's my story. I do talk about how upset I am if abortion would become illegal again, because then only women with money would be able to go to Europe. The others would resort to abortionists and to coat hangers. It would be a terrible situation.
And they used to do that before.
Right.
And it was deadly.
And I'm upset that in this wonderful, rich country of ours, that there's not enough money for family planning, for Planned Parenthood. So there are three things today that in terms of political issues I do talk about.
Well, let me just say that is the smack dab middle of what some of the political debate is. You've talked about immigration, you talked about women's rights, and you talked about class and income inequality. So I think you're smack dab in the middle of a pretty heated political discussion in the middle of that.
And that's why I'm very grateful that these young people stand up to be counted.
That's good. Well, I think that's everyone is, I think,
New
right?
school.
I do want to talk to you a little bit about something you said. You said you're a Zionist, and I think a lot of people react to that who are maybe not Jewish, or even who are Jewish. What does that mean today to be a Zionist? Because you look at what's happening in the Middle East, you look at what's happening in Israel, and you look at what's happening with vis-a-vis the Trump administration in Israel. It seems to me, now I'm a layperson, I'm just a country reporter, but it seems to me that, and I'm taking my mic out of my pocket because I think I'm sitting on the antenna. It seems to me that what's needed are jobs there, and if everyone, it levels the playing field for everybody. Get the economy going. Stop with going back to the tit for tat for 1,400 years, and figure out how you get everyone to have jobs and get equality and lessen the inequality gap there, and you would solve some of these problems.
No question. I let you, politicians and people...
Don't lump me with politicians.
I let you do that, but I want to tell you something. That I just heard 2 weeks ago that I'm getting an honorary doctorate at Ben Gurion University, which is in Beersheba in Israel, in the Negev, which makes me very happy. I have a few honorary doctorates in this country.
I know.
But I go to Israel every single year. I still have friends from my childhood who were in the orphanage with me. And for me to now get an honorary doctorate is wonderful. I do not talk. You can come with me.
I would love to come with you.
Ask your wife if she lets you.
She'll come with us too, I think, Bob.
Okay, but I don't talk about the politics of Israel. But if you would have told me in 1948, when Israel was created, I remember Ben Gurion talking on radio. You're too young, you don't know about this.
I remember David Ben Gurion.
But Ben Gurion, you met him?
No, but I remember him. And he was alive when I was alive.
So Ben Gurion on the radio, when he declared Israel, if you would have told me that today, all of those issues that you just mentioned, jobs and getting the diversity and being able to live in a country, if you would have told me that we have not solved that today, I wouldn't have believed it. So we have to work on it. That's why we have to get young people to stand up and to believe and to talk about what they believe in.
I find it fascinating that the Foreign Students Association in the New School, when you were here, was headed by a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and an Arab student.
Right.
And that's a great thing, and I think it speaks to the
student. He was brilliant,
and
he was short.
Well, so it was really about and short people. So this is a great progressive school.
Then a friend of mine, an attorney, So the president, your president here, is an attorney.
Yes, he is.
Jeff Tabak is an attorney. An attorney friend said to this short Arab, with whom I was very good friends, that he has to marry an American. I wasn't an American yet, in order to stay in this country. So he went to Florida, married an American.
A Jewish American?
No,
just
an American.
An American, there you go. So I want to just, before we get into the sex part of it, that's what it was called before Dr. Ruth. It was sex because sex was a little like cancer was decades ago, and it was just like called the big C, and you sort of took sex out of the closet. And we're going to get to that in a second, but I want to talk a little bit about what sparked you when you were actually here. What did you get out of this? By the time you got your master's degree in sociology in 1959, what did you learn about the New School? How did it help propel you to become Dr. Ruth?
I've really thought that I'm in paradise. Here is a university that understood that my English was not an Oxford English, that I had to learn English. They understood the German Jewish background, because many of those professors, Wertheimer and some others, were German Jews. Some were Orthodox, some were not Orthodox. I felt very good here. I felt this is a place that understands what it is to be an immigrant, what it is to be a refugee, what it is not to know the language and the history of this country. So the New School was like the ideal place for somebody like me.
It spoke to you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people feel like, I know I felt like that
Tell
when
what's your story.
when I decided to go back to school. I looked at other schools. I asked my old school, San Diego State University, I said, I had 104.5 units when I got kicked out. I was a valued alum. I was on a business school advisory board when I was in Southern California, and I said, let me come back and take those classes or take them online. They said, well, no, you got to move back here and take them in class. And I said, I'm in New York. I have a family in New York. And so I decided then I was going to look around here, and I went to other universities who shall remain unidentified, and they wanted me to spend, like basically the rest of my natural life taking classes. And most schools want 60 units from a student to get a degree from there, and I'd still be several years away from all that. So because I was taking one class, 3 classes a year, and 1 class a semester. Anyway, I felt like when I got here, and I talked to Carol Wilder, who was the dean here, and I talked to other professors and students, I felt like this was talking to me. This got it. And they, rather than say, oh, geez, you got kicked out of school 40 years ago, they said, wow, you got kicked out of school 40 years ago? Come on in. And it was just, I felt there was like open arms. And I really did feel like it did speak to me. And I could do good work. And some of my best work as a reporter I did on papers and projects I did here in the New School.
So it's wonderful that this New School is now celebrating 100 years. And the other day I was at an event, and I could see that they have students of not only of all sizes, but also students of a variety, a
diverse
variety, a diversity that I do not see at some other colleges. I'm now teaching at Columbia, and I'm teaching at
But that's a diverse campus too, Columbia.
Wonderful.
Yeah. All right, so let me get
now
into...
Now we want to talk about sex.
Yeah. Is it time? Okay. When you started out, there was a sexual revolution that was going on in this country, and it was nearing its completion. And you came on the scene saying something very different. There was a lot of sex around, not that there wasn't always, but it was much more open. And yet you came on saying that something is missing here. It's not just about sex, it's about human connection. And you talked so frankly about sex because you were bringing the humanity into it. And that's really, I think, how you made your name and why you were so accepted, because you were forcing people to be honest.
Not only that, I got the opportunity to have those 15 minutes, a quarter after midnight, on NBC radio. And I taped it on Tuesdays. And as it shows in the film, everybody at NBC radio on Tuesday at 4, whatever it was, they listened in. And then I said, let me do it live. I first didn't think that I could do that with my accent. But then I realized that actually the accent helped me a great deal, because the moment people listened to me, they knew it was me. And they also knew that I was very well trained, because I already had Dr. Helen Singer Kaplan as a mentor at Cornell, and I worked with her for 6 years. And I knew what I was talking about, and I knew about sexual literacy. So it was wonderful to do that first 15 minutes and then 10 years, every Sunday night from 10 to 12. Now, it was very fortunate, because people on Sunday nights, when they came from Long Island, from the Hamptons or wherever, in the cars, there was nothing else to do but to listen to me. By the time they got home, they were nicely sexually aroused. And when I now meet somebody who says, I listen to you, I say, give me a little money for a scholarship.
So you were working it even then, right?
I started to. So it was very fortunate. Then came the AIDS crisis. And I, right away, went on the air and said how people have to be careful, how they have to use condoms. I did say about homosexuality. There was a call, that's the best way I can describe it, from Indiana. A young man called, he was in high school. Dr. Ruth, I feel I'm attracted to boys and not to women. If I will tell my parents, they're going to kick me out of the house. And I said, keep your mouth shut. Today it's very difficult to think back. In those days, there were parents who could not accept that. I said, keep your mouth shut, finish high school, go to a large university where there are other people like you, and then go to a big city. I met this fellow at a restaurant a few years later. He said, before you leave, Dr. Ruth, I need to talk to you. I went to a corner. He said, you saved my life. I would have committed suicide. You saved my life. I listened to you. I finished high school. I went to a large university, and now I live in New York City.
Wow.
Very difficult.
And yet, the flip side of that, Ruth, is that there are a lot of people who kept all this in the closet, literally and figuratively, and inside themselves, and they didn't do well either. You know?
Now I have to tell you.
I mean, this person was lucky, but there are a lot of young people, gay people, who would say, you know, it killed me. It really killed me psychologically to not be able to be honest about who I was.
So when people say something about that issue, I say, we don't know the etiology, the reason for homosexuality. We don't have enough research yet. One thing we do know, loud and clear at the New School, with Bill here, respect is not debatable. So when you start from that, then you can say, but we do need more research, we need more knowledge, and respect is not debatable. So things are different today.
They are different.
And when somebody says, this is my husband, about a guy, I had to get used to that myself. Now it rolls off my tongue. And when a woman
It didn't
says,
take that long, right?
With my
Same-sex
accent,
marriage,
right.
same-sex marriage has been, you know, in the law of the land for not that long,
right.
and we are all much accustomed.
If a woman says to me, this is my wife, introducing me to her partner, it took some getting used to, but now it's working.
There are, you know, I say this because I have some knowledge of this. My oldest daughter, when she was in high school, said, Dad, Mom, I'm gay. And it wasn't a big shock to us, but I was so happy that at the age of 16, she was able to say this to us and not have to live in the closet, not have to keep all this, not just from us, but from the world. And so I am an ally, hashtag ally, I am an ally, and I'm proud of it. And I would be infuriated, and I am infuriated. As a reporter, I'm infuriated because I'm a citizen as well. For anyone who dares think that they're going to take rights away from my daughter, who is going to have as full a life as any other human being on the planet. And so I am so grateful. And I have a lot of friends who are gay and who grew up in the closet, and I see what it did to them. And they are so happy that this young generation right now doesn't have to worry about that, because they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to wait to go to college and move to New York. Right. They can do it anywhere. because it's the law of the
So
land
things
still.
have changed.
Right.
There's no question about
So
it.
how has your sex advice changed over those years?
I tell you what has changed. There was a lot of sex advice for women who did not know and men and women did not know that it takes a longer time for a woman to have an orgasm. Women did not know that they had to actually, in order to have that orgasmic response, they had to concentrate and they had to give themselves time, and that it took some longer time to have an orgasm. And for men, I got most of the questions about premature ejaculation, men who ejaculated faster than they wanted to, and women who maybe did not know that before the orgasmic response, there is a moment. It has a bad name. It's called a dead moment. I don't like that word dead in it. So I say there's a moment where nothing happens. So women sometimes said, okay, it won't happen today, maybe another time. I had to teach so many men and women to continue being stimulated in order to have that orgasmic response.
How did you become an expert at this?
Huh?
How did you become an expert at this?
How did I become
Become an expert, yes.
First of all, no personal questions. However,
This is a personal conversation we're having.
go and watch the movie, ask Dr. Ruth. You'll get some answers there. But I was very fortunate by being in a program by this Dr. Helen Singer Kaplan, and I worked with her for 5 years. She was a fantastic mentor. And she wrote the first book about the new sex therapy, and she talked about all of these things. She talked about how to teach men not to be premature ejaculators, not to ejaculate faster than they want to, how for women to learn. Now, the other day, urologist, I sent men who have a problem first to a urologist to see if it's a medical issue. Women who have a problem, I sent first to a gynecologist to know if there's something physical. So there is one urologist I met last week. He said that he's still looking for the G-spot, because one of the things that I certainly did was dispel a lot of myth. Because some women came and said they think they're not normal because they can't find the G-spot. We have no idea if there's a G-spot, the Grafenberg spot inside the vagina. Some women are more sensitive there, but it's not that a woman has to find a G-spot. Some women can have fantastic orgasms without knowing about the G-spot. So I was able to take those myths. And for example, what the British mother told her daughter at the night of the wedding, after the wedding ceremony, lie back and think of England. That's not what we want. Also in the Jewish tradition, Bill,
While you're in paradise and the honeymoon.
in the Jewish tradition, it says that a lesson taught with humor is a lesson retained. And if you can, not jokes, I don't get jokes, but I can use some humor. It also says that you learn from your students. I learn a lot of every time when I answer any questions, I learn from students.
So this was all very scandalous at the time you started talking about this.
Yes.
We had a sexual revolution where people were much more freer and, free love and everything else. But the actual nitty-gritty of it was scandalous. And you became scandalous to some degree. You were great for a lot of people, but there were other people who said, this woman shouldn't be talking like this on television.
Right. And I said, if you don't want to hear it, you are right, turn your dial, period. I didn't try to convince anybody. I said, this is not a required course. This is something about an education for pleasure and for good relationships. And move your dial, go to something else.
You have updated your advice for all this based on the realities, based on this, social media. I assume most of the young people here don't date like we used to date. I think they go to an app and get it, right? And get the date. Be careful.
Problem.
Ruth says I talk too fast, and I was thinking too fast. Yeah.
And not only that, in the last edition of Sex for Dummies,
Yes, your book.
just
one of the
now
40
which you
books.
get to take home.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm very worried about all of those gadgets because the art of conversation, exactly what you and I are doing right now, is getting lost. Everybody is hanging as if the world is going under if they don't watch all the time. I'm not against it. I see the good parts of it in terms of information, but I think we have to worry about a generation that will not know how to have a conversation, and a generation that's going to be lonely. Because, and a generation that has to understand that the best sex is in a relationship. I'm not saying necessarily married, but I'm saying there has to be a relationship.
There's got to be a bond. There's got to be some sort of human connection.
Yes.
Right. And you know, I was looking back at what you've said years past. You're not saying anything different now than you were then. I think it's different now because this has made us, in fact, into our own little bubbles, right? And has isolated us and makes us lonely. I think
you
as a society.
walk into a restaurant
And everyone's like this.
you see a family. Everybody is watching their
Right. So the human connection that you preached back then and respect for each other.
I still do.
Right. And but it's different now. It is different because, in fact, we've moved farther away from being connected.
No question.
And it's not about, and I understand what you're saying about not being married, but you know, young people, dating is even an antiquated word, right? It's hooking up and then you unhook.
Big problem. Because in my way of thinking, there will be more sexually transmitted diseases now because people are going into bed without knowing much about that partner. And that holds true also for older people because they think there's medication available, so who needs to worry about? That's a big worry these days.
And yet I think a lot of people, and correct me if I'm wrong, all the young people in the audience, I think that this is much more aware audience about sexually transmitted disease than we've ever had, right? I mean, you grew up, you know, the AIDS fear was everywhere, and so I think protected sex is a bigger deal and more accepted then than it is now. My generation said it's like, you know, for guys, it's like taking a bath with your socks on. And
I'm old-fashioned and a square.
Yes.
I want people to have a relationship. I think that the best sex is if they have a relationship, if they have somebody who is smiling when they see you, there's somebody who is waiting for you when you come home. I do want to have relationships.
the other thing that I think was bold about you, and I think you're still doing it, although have sparked some controversy, and I want to get to that in a second, is that you want people to be honest, you know, to not have this be a fantasy, that this contact, sex, is an honest bond between you, and it's got to be.
You don't
honest.
have to tell your partner of now everything about your partners from yesterday. I mean, from the past.
Yeah.
You have to give some information, but you have to build on a new relationship and to make sure that you're giving it a lot of goodwill, not always thinking that there's something better waiting out there.
I'm just looking at the time. I was actually thinking more about honesty about your feelings now, about what you expect and what you would like, and talking about sex. And you still push that, I think.
Yeah.
You still believe in that, and maybe more now than ever.
And it's very nice that I learn from every audience because I say to people, you don't have to say I. When you ask a question now, say, a friend of mine has a question.
Asking for a friend.
Right.
Yeah, we've done that. There was some controversy right before the Me Too movement. You were on a radio show and you explained a position that you've had before about consent. And there was it sparked some controversy because your position was, if I can paraphrase this, you know, once you're naked in bed with someone, no matter whether it's the same sex or not, that's sort of an implied consent right there.
Well, loud and clear. In the Jewish tradition, in the Talmud, it says, if that part of the male anatomy is aroused, the brain, the sechel, the brain flies out of your head. In America, there's a saying, God didn't give you men enough blood for two heads. So I absolutely, and I know it is controversial, in my way of thinking, two people have to have a relationship, and I can't believe that two people naked in bed can decide at one point or another, no, I changed my mind. It just, in my way of thinking, they have to know beforehand before they get naked in bed.
But I understand.
I'm not talking about rape.
No, I understand.
Anything that has to do with rape, anything that has to do with force, has to go to the police and to social workers or psychiatrists, not to live with it for a whole lifetime. You have to go and discuss it. Not with me, I'm not an expert. People like me have to be very honest where the boundaries are of my knowledge. But otherwise, I tell everybody there has to be a relationship before you go into bed.
I appreciate that. But by the same token, you talk about being honest and having a connection. And if one person changes his or her mind, then part of that respect is to acknowledge that and respect that, right?
Not possible. Not possible. Once naked in bed, not possible.
Wow, okay. So that, I would say that's controversial. And I would say that I would guess that maybe a lot of people wouldn't agree with you, who would love Dr. Ruth, but maybe wouldn't agree with that. I don't know. Is that true or not? No, okay, there's some people who don't agree. So you would say to them what? Because what you're saying basically is that men can control themselves.
I'm not only saying men can't control themselves. I'm saying that there has to be a relationship before they have sex. This kind of hooking up is not going to be useful for a relationship, and it's not going to be satisfactory. Some people will disagree with me, and I will say, have a good time. Make sure you take a condom into bed.
I got it. I would say that having been married several times and very much in love with my wife now, I would say that if that happened and she had a change of mind or I had a change of mind, that we would expect the other person to understand that as part of our close relationship.
All right.
So we can disagree on that, I guess.
I don't disagree, but I say let's backtrack. Let's think of it as having first to know each other, and if you know each other, interesting, in the Hebrew language, the word lada'at means to know each other. It also means sex. Very interesting. So what I'm saying is old-fashioned and square, know each other, have a good relationship, and then have fantastic good sex.
There you go.
And then I'll teach you good new positions.
And who knows, you have many years to live, you've got to find new ones too you can teach us, right? All right. Anything else you want to talk about? I know you have all these new books, and you have...
No, I just wanted to, the books will go to your house.
Okay, appreciate it.
The new one is the Sex for Dummies, a new edition, the 4th edition, because it talks about the loneliness, it talks about the things that you and I just talked about. The other one is a children's book that is about diversity. Very nice. Crocodile, you're beautiful. And he talks about a little ant should be happy to be an ant, because if they cooperate, they can build bridges. The other one is called Ask Dr. Ruth. It's like an autobiography that I did before I knew that I would do the documentary, but it completes each other. I want to say something about the documentary.
Yes.
You know that there is a part of animation. And I was worried about that, because when they told me animation, I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to make me look like Mickey Mouse. Or like...
I work for the Walt Disney Company, so that's not a bad thing in my neighborhood.
Or like, any of those characters. It came out beautifully because the two people who did the animation, for example, were able to show, coming back to what we started to talk about, they were able to show my mother and grandmother at the railroad station in Frankfurt saying goodbye to me like my father said goodbye when I was on the train, and he tried to smile and I waved. I tried to smile, even so I was very unhappy being on the train, and smile. What it does show is as if my mother and grandmother were the only people on that railroad station. That's not true. There were all of the other mothers and grandmothers who waved their children goodbye.
But the story was about you, so they were focusing on you.
Right. And this way I can make it a point of saying about loneliness. And that we have to talk about it. I don't want people to be lonely. There are other issues in that animation that you then can build on when you talk about it.
You know, you bring it back to the Holocaust, and I can't help but think you are still this ball of energy at the age of 91 with hopes and dreams for going forward. Best years still ahead.
And I hold on to young guys like you instead of a cane.
There you go. I love that. I love that. First that you called me young, and that's wonderful. I do want to, you know, what's your secret? I mean, I don't want to say what vitamins you take, but you are driven, it seems to me, by that memory of your parents being killed by the Nazis, and you're getting a second chance to make something happen for your life.
And not only that, I did a longitudinal study. I followed the children, 50 of them, who were with me in the children's home and became orphans. I found them, and I did a longitudinal study and found that none of them committed suicide. None of them became clinically depressed. None of them kind of didn't make it. Nobody else became a sex therapist. And the reason for that is the early socialization. We all were in a loving home. Until I was 10, the youngest were 6.5. And that early socialization helped this group of children who became orphans of the Holocaust to survive and to be productive. And that's also what happens with me, coming from an Orthodox Jewish background. And what happens with me, that I can be laughing and smiling and saying, I have to make a dent in society.
Well, you have
I
made...
didn't know I would talk about sex from morning till night.
Well, that's one way to make a dent, I guess. But you have made more than a dent, and we're all the better for it. So I think that you're a great symbol for the new school, because you are embodying, taking...
And I watch you every night.
Well, then that's
5 days a week.
I appreciate that, and before you go to bed,
At
we're together.
Before I go to bed.
There we go. Dr. Ruth Westheimer, I thank you for this.
Do we have time for some questions?
We do. We have some time for some questions. If anyone wants to ask someone, try to keep it brief.
Say a friend of I saw them standing up. Do it again. I just saw them standing up for us. Thank you.
We're going to do about...
Thank you.
We're going to do about 10 minutes for questions, and then I think
Hey,
there's a reception.
the president is standing up.
He's giving you a standing ovation. All right.
And Jeff.
Yes, ma'am.
And Jeff stood up. Come
Yes,
to
ma'am.
visit the museum. Jeff, did you hear me say it?
A couple of times.
Good.
All right, see you. Hi.
Thank you for coming, Dr. Ruth. I've been wanting to talk to you about consent for the last 34 years, since I was an undergraduate at Cornell, and I heard you say something very similar about what you just said.
If you could just talk slowly, so she can...
No, repeat it.
She has been thinking about this question for 34 years about consent when she was a student at Cornell.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1994, you said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as a point of return, a point at which one no longer has the right to decide what will be done to one's body. No means no." You said that, Dr. Ruth.
You said no meant no. No means no in 1994. I'm just summarizing that.
In 49 states, the law says that continuing sex after withdrawal of consent is grounds for sexual assault charges. Now, the Jewish line that you just used about the brain flying out is not from the Talmud. When you used that in 2015 on the Diane Rem show, two prominent rabbis publicly rebutted your statement.
Two rabbis rebuked you, saying, or rebutted your statement, saying that that was from the Talmud. You quoted something from the Talmud. Okay. Anyway, if you get to your question, that would be great.
There are many things that can happen in bed, too many to be discussed in advance, that some find sexy and others find painful or humiliating. Choking, hair pulling, anal sex, slapping, bukkake, to name a few.
But we're not I don't think she talked about that, right? She's talking about no means no.
This is consent.
What's your
consent
question?
is very nuanced. How does she respond to those issues that arise during the sex act that haven't been discussed before?
The question is, some of that is not just, I don't feel like having sex after I did feel like having sex, which you disagree with. You say that once the horse is out of the barn, it's out of the barn. But there are other issues, like abuse and everything else. And does your position, if I can paraphrase you, does your position then give approval to that just by default?
Like I said to you before and to everybody loud and clear, I'm not talking about a rape, I'm not talking about forceful, I'm talking about being in bed. I say that again and I stick by that if two people are naked in bed and the idea is to have sex, that it's almost impossible to then say, no, I changed my mind. That's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, hi. My name's Aliana. I go to the...
Speak a little closer.
Oh, sorry. My name's Aliana. I go to school here at the New School, and I was wondering if you had some advice for aspiring sex educators or therapists.
Aspiring what?
Aspiring sex educators or therapists.
She's a student at the New School. Ariana is her name, and she wants to know if you have any advice for aspiring sex educators.
Yes. First of all, bravo. We need more like this. No question. We need more programs for people to be sex educators, to make sure that people are sexually explicit. I want to give you very fast 2 examples. In today's world, girls menstruate at an earlier and earlier age. We don't know why. What we do know is that people like you, as sex educators, must educate boys and girls before it happens, so that the girl doesn't go to the bathroom, menstruates, and will get scared for life, that blood is coming out from a place where she doesn't expect it. Many women and men, both, in the olden days, did not know about nocturnal emission. I remember a mother screaming at her 14-year-old son, "What's the matter with you? How come you don't go to the bathroom? Why do you urinate in bed?" He didn't urinate in bed. He had wet dreams. He had nocturnal emission. In today's world, we have no choice but to educate at an earlier age so that there is no anxiety when that actually happens. Because the boy didn't know about it, and the mother didn't know about it. And the girls, we don't know why we have girls menstruating earlier. And
well, some people think it's because they're injecting all these they're drinking all these hormones like in milk, not organic food, all that stuff.
Some people say nutrition, but people like you, absolutely, we need more programs to be sexually educated, sexually knowledgeable, and to be sex educators.
So your reaction is bravo. Huh? Your reaction is bravo.
Bravo.
Okay.
Big bravo.
Did you get your advice? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And there are programs, you just have to choose one that fits your needs. I don't know if the New School has one. If the president, is he still here? If the New School doesn't have a program, please start a program about sex educators.
There you go. Thank you. Good luck to you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello.
Shana Tova. And
Shana Tova means Happy New Year.
Yes. I was wondering what your resolutions were for the new Jewish New Year.
What your resolutions are for the new Jewish New Year?
For the new Jewish
Year? Do you have resolutions for the new year?
Of course. Like everybody else, some will happen and some will not happen. And my resolution is to continue to speak up for those things that I told you that I now speak up, which I did not before, and to make sure that as long as I can, I'm going to learn from you students. Because I told you that in the Talmud it says that a teacher learns from their students. Thank you for that question. Shana Tova. Can all of you say Shana Tova?
Shana Tova.
Nice.
Now, there's some people say La Shana Tova. What's the L?
Shana means
Lashana.
to a good year.
To a good year,
Right.
okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I graduated from the New School 2 years ago, so when I heard that you were also alum of the New School, I had no idea, and it's very interesting and beautiful to hear.
She's glad that you're a fellow alum with her. She graduated 2 years.
2 years
Her name is
right.
Hannah.
Yeah, so to make a long story short, I, a year ago, started a podcast called the Women's Pelvic Health Podcast after I had lots of pelvic floor, pelvic pain, sexual health issues.
Hold on.
Yeah.
She had lots of pelvic pain issues and health issues, and she started a podcast called
It's called the Women's Pelvic Health Podcast.
the Women's Pelvic Health Podcast.
Yeah, I realize that so many sexual health issues are common amongst women and no one talks about them, and it's very hard to get the right answers from doctors. So
What's
it's
the
grown
question?
into something that's becoming significant and making an impact and helping a lot of women. But my question for you is, how can I continue to continue your legacy and other, powerful women who have done work similar to yours, continue this for all the women who really need this help and men who need this education and knowledge?
How can she continue your legacy for all the men and women who need this knowledge?
So the one thing that I want to tell you, which I said before, when I did my private practice, which I'm not doing anymore, I let young people do it. I want to go to the theater in the evenings. But very important to know that to distinguish when a woman says, for example, that she has discomfort, what you are talking about, before I give her a second appointment, she has to see a gynecologist because there could be medical issues. Any man who has difficulties obtaining or maintaining an erection first has to see a urologist. Then the urologist gives me a note saying, Mr. So-and-so, physically is okay, you can do sex therapy. I have never been embarrassed to say you can only come back to me if I get a note from a gynecologist or a urologist, because sometimes there are physical issues, and people like me as an educator can't know about these issues.
Are you dealing with these issues during your podcast?
No, yeah, in the podcast, but the problem currently that I have seen is that a lot of gynecologists are not familiar with pelvic floor conditions,
So
and
here-
they don't properly diagnose women. So women have painful sex or vaginal pain, bladder pain, and their gynecologist doesn't help them.
Here's
that's
something.
really what I'm doing.
Here's something for the president. Since you have the new school, make also sure maybe that there is a continuing education for physicians, men and women, in terms of sexual health. Or sign up with another institution who might have that. It's true that some gynecologists and urologists might need some postgraduate studies. I was so fortunate that Helen Singer Kaplan, what she really mentioned over and over, she was not a gynecologist and she was a psychiatrist. What she mentioned over and over, to send to gynecologists and urologists, to be aware that a sex therapist can know about the sexual functioning and can know about different positions and can know how some people use issues of sex to have some other problems in that relationship. So that has to be cleared up. Thank you.
Are you finding, real quickly, that your audience in the podcast agrees with you that the doctors do not have enough knowledge or don't care that much about it? I don't know what the reason is.
Yeah, that's what
They don't
say,
have the expertise?
And this is in the least bragging way, but
Don't go
I
to
have sex therapists and doctors and specialists and patients talk on my podcast every week, and people message me saying that they've been suffering for 10 years and they haven't gotten this knowledge. And in New York, it's easier because there's much more access, but in the rest of the country and the rest of the world, there isn't access, as much access, and there isn't as much education and resources. So people have no idea how to get help.
Well, good for you for
But
having
I-
this podcast and
Thank
getting
you.
the word out. All right,
And
thank you
more
very much, Anna.
education is
Yep.
needed.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Two more, okay.
Two more.
Hello, Dr. Ruth. Great hearing from you. My question is an easy one. Knowing that you're 91 and 9 years away from approaching 100 yourself,
Like the new school.
Yeah.
yes. What goals do you have for yourself to accomplish within these next 9 years before you turn 100?
I hope that I stay healthy, that I can continue doing this kind of seminars with a brilliant guy like Bill and to answer questions.
That's a good.
Right.
We could come back, David, if we can, President Van Zandt, if we can do it for her 100th birthday.
Right?
Right?
We'll do that.
That'd be great. Last question, okay. Thank you.
Hello, Bill. Hello, Dr. Ruth.
Hi.
My name is Blair, and I'm a midwife. My answer to your earlier question is we need more midwives. But as a healthcare professional, something I have seen is this idea that sex for women is supposed to hurt. Do you agree that that is something you have seen in your career, that sex is just something that's supposed to hurt?
Sex is something that's supposed to
The conventional wisdom among some, this woman is a midwife, that
Wonderful.
sex is supposed to hurt for women.
Midwife changed that right now. It's not supposed to hurt. Anybody who says it hurts, I say you have to go to see a gynecologist. There might be reasons why there's not enough lubrication. Or maybe you don't use lubrication. Some women think using lubrication would mean that that they're not mature, that they need aids like lubrication for having intercourse that is not painful. That's all misinformation. You are perfectly placed to change that.
Congratulations.
Every single day. You, a midwife like you, there was a group of midwives that I talked to at Columbia University, and that's where, very important people, because you can help to dispel those myths and to make sure that people have satisfactory, wonderful sex life. That's what I wish all of you.
Thank you.
That's a good New Year's resolution.
We should go on the tour together.
She wants me to go on a tour with her. It could get people like this. I guess. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Ruth, you're wonderful.
Thank you.